That's so good. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. Hi, my name is Liz, and in today's video we are going to be doing my February wrap up. So we are going to chat about all of the books that I read in the month of February. It is crazy that it is the first day of March. I'm filming this on March 1st. That's insane. Like, February went by in a blink, and I know it's a shorter month, but not by that many days. Let me get my reading journal out because I can give you guys my stats. So this month I read 12 books total. 8 were physically read and 4 were audiobooks. I'm so excited. I did have 1 5-star, which is really exciting. I read 3 books that were on my winter TBR, which I don't think I'm gonna end up getting to the rest of my winter TBR just because I'm just like not in the mood for them anymore, and I'm not gonna force myself to read them. So I still have like 7 books that were on my winter TBR, which I could technically finish this month, but there's just so many other books that I'm like are on my radar, like my immediate radar right now, that I need to read. And so yeah, I also completed a series, which feels really good. And yeah, those are my stats for the month. It was a really great reading month. I feel like at the beginning especially I was very motivated to read. Towards the end I had a work trip and I wasn't able to read as much like that final week of February, so I definitely slowed down there. But then the rest of the month I feel like overall I was super motivated and really enjoying the books I was reading. And like I said, I had 1 5-star. That's a win in my book. Enough yapping about stats, and let's go ahead and chat about the books that I read this past month. Starting off the month on a high note, I read 3 books that were all on my winter TBR, and these are 3 books that I have been putting off reading for so long. Like, these were probably the longest books I've had on my physical TBR, and it's probably been going on like 3 or 4 years that I've owned this series and have not finished it or even picked it up. And that is the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy by Stephanie Garber. I did read the Caraval trilogy many years ago, and so I was excited to read this one because it is a spin-off with one of your characters that you meet later in that series. So I knew I wanted to read it eventually, and I've also heard amazing things about this trilogy as well. So I went in with very high expectations, but I think I just had put it off for so long to where I no longer wanted to read them. That's like a horrible feeling. And I actually really enjoyed this trilogy, so it's sad that it took me so long to finally pick them up. This story, you are following Jax and Evangeline. Jax, in this world, he is actually the Prince of Hearts. He's known as one of the Fates, and so he has a lot of power. He's basically a god. Think of him that way. You meet Jax in the Caraval trilogy. He has a very deadly kiss, so if he kisses you, you will die. The only person who can survive his kiss is his true love, and so he's on this hunt for his true love, and he has been for his entire existence. Then walks in Evangeline. She, at the very beginning of the series, is in love with this man, and he ends up getting engaged to her stepsister, and so she goes to Jax to try to get help so that way she can end up with her true love, because she believes this man is her true love. Things go south, and it kind of just goes from there. Throughout Caraval, you learn to never make a deal with a fate, to never trust a fate, and that becomes very apparent in this trilogy. You do get to encounter a lot of different fates, which was really fun, and you get to kind of explore more of this world that you're in. One of the things I love about Stephanie Garber's writing is it's super magical, and she does such a great job with the descriptions to where you can fully picture what's going on. Like, I feel like even if you struggle picturing things, she kind of lays it all out there for you, and it just is so magical and beautiful, and I would love to step into one of her worlds. I do recommend looking at fan art. I was looking at fan art while I was reading this trilogy, and it really put things into perspective for me, and I loved it. It was so good and so beautiful. I will say, out of the trilogy, the second book was actually my favorite. The first book I think I gave 3.75 stars. The second book I gave 4.5 stars, and then the third book I gave 4 stars. So overall, loved the trilogy. It was definitely like a 4-star read for me overall. Moving right along, the next, I think, handful of books I actually read in a reading vlog earlier this month, and that was when I was reading romance books leading up to Valentine's Day. So I'm not gonna like go in super detailed explanation for each of these, but I will tell you like generically what it's about, and then what I rated them, and maybe like 1 or 2 thoughts and feelings on the book. But if you're wanting some more like live reactions, not live, but more in-depth reactions, what I was going through and the thoughts and feelings I had while I was reading each of these books, then you definitely should go watch that video, because it is a longer one, and I did get through a lot of the books that I read this month in that video. video. But the first one that I read in that video was How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates by Shaylee Thompson. I actually did this one as an audiobook, and I'm so glad that I did. The audiobook was so well done, and it's one of my favorite audiobooks that I've listened to so far this year. And as soon as I listened to it, I immediately went and got a physical copy because I loved this story. It was so much fun. This is following our main character who ends up going with her best friend to a speed dating event at this club. There's 10 guys, 10 girls, and like after so much time they switch, the guys rotate. You guys know what speed dating is. I think our main character, she's on like her 8th date with a guy, and all of a sudden the power cuts out, and then when the power comes back on, her date who's sitting across from her has had his throat. And then the power cuts out again, and when it comes back on, there's even more bodies in this room. And then everything just turns into utter chaos, and you're following along with our main character as her and the survivors are trying to make their way out of this club with a serial killer on the loose. It's very much like survival of the fittest. It definitely felt like a slasher film because there's some characters who just make the dumbest decisions ever. And our main character, her and her best friend, have this whole list in their bathroom in their apartment of what to do to survive a horror movie. And so this really comes in handy. And there was just so much comedy thrown in with this serious situation that I just could not stop listening to it. Another thing I loved about the audiobook is that you get 2 different voices. So you have your main character's voice, and then all the men also have their own narrator. One of my biggest pet peeves in an audiobook is whenever you have 2 narrators, but they don't have the conversations together. Like the girl will then try to talk like the guy during her chapters, and then the guy will try to talk like a girl in his. Why don't you just use them both for the conversations? Like, why you have them, you have 2 narrators. How about we use them for the proper voices? And that's one thing that they did in this audiobook that I thoroughly enjoyed. Also, it has like the background noises. So if someone like screamed, then you hear like a scream in the background, or like anytime one of the weapons that was being used did something, you could like hear like blood splatter. I don't know, that sounds really gross, but like it really added to my whole listening experience. I felt like I was with them trying to find my way out and escape. Definitely keep this on your radar if you want like an anti-lovey-dovey slasher book. This one was a lot of fun. The next book I read in that video is Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. I finally got my hands on this book. I know this came out last year, but it came out in hardcover, and I have to read her books in paperback. So I waited for paperback to finally come out, and it did, and I'm so happy I finally was able to read this book. I love Abby Jimenez's romances. They're so good. She's definitely in my top 3 like romance authors. One thing I love about her romances is it doesn't just feel like a cliche romance. All of her characters are dealing with such real life scenarios. It's not like super cliche and convenient, I guess. And she does have a really great streak of adding like some sort of representation in her books. I'm able to empathize and relate to them a lot more. In this story, you're following our main character who ends up going on a date with a local vet. They have this really cute meet cute at the vet clinic whenever she brings in a kitten that she found on the street, and they end up going on a date together, and it's a night that they will never forget. But at the end, she tells him that she actually has to move cross country to California to stay with her family because her mother has early onset dementia, and so she's trying to be there to help support her mother and her family in her mother's final years. And he owns the vet clinic in Minnesota. So long distance, time and time again, they show each other how much they care and how much they want to make this work. He especially puts in so much effort to date her, and like he kind of is like, you know what, screw it. I can't stop thinking about you. This is a once in a lifetime relationship to me. You get to see a long distance relationship, and one that is so inconvenient, and they are dealing with so many hard real life problems while also trying to be intentional with their time and find a way to see each other and be with each other. It was heartbreaking, but it was also so beautiful and really shows the power of when you know, also right person, wrong time. Definitely one of her more emotional books that she's written, but so well done and so well worth the heartache. The next book I also read in that reading vlog was Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This is her novella that just came out this past month. I believe it was out as a digital format for a very long time, but it finally came out in print. And you guys know I'm obsessed with Ali Hazelwood's writing. I love her books so much. Her characters are always so quirky and unique, and I feel like they all are their own person. And even though a lot of people say her books are copy paste, they're not. They are about women in STEM, or like in this book's case, a woman who is a video game designer. It's less than 200 pages. Like I said, it's a novella, so it is on the shorter side. And my one critique about this book is I wish it was longer. You're following our main character, like I said, who is a video game designer. The male lead, he is also a video game designer, but at a rival rival company. This big project comes up where they want both companies to coordinate and work together on this project. And so since they're rivals, there's a lot of animosity going on. And this company that's spearheading this project sends both of their companies on like a company retreat to do like team building and try to get along. So that way then they can start this project, kind of have like a fresh start. Our main character, she has met our male lead many times at different video game conventions, and he's always been very standoffish and like almost rude to her, whereas she's always tried to be super friendly. She's trying to figure out why he doesn't like her, and that's pretty much this whole story. The whole plot is her trying to figure out why he doesn't like her. Meanwhile, it's like forced proximity because they're stuck at this cabin. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, my only critique was I wish there was more book, because I definitely wanted to follow our characters a little bit longer and see what would happen out in the real world, like once they leave this cabin, what their relationship looks like then. The next book that I finished that month, it was not in that video because I was listening to it as an audiobook throughout the month, and that is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. This blew up. Everyone knows about this book, and I'm so glad that I listened to it as an audiobook because this book is all letters or correspondence, hence the title. There's many different like characters and voices, and I loved the audiobook because it did have all those characters, and it was really easy for me to distinguish between who our main character was writing to and who was writing her back. So I really enjoyed that. Our main character, her name is Sybil. She, I believe, is either in her 70s or 80s. I want to say 70s. And you're following her life from like then on. It throws you into her life. Like she's been sending and writing letters her entire life, but you're thrown in when she's in her 70s, and you get to see these different relationships through her letters. I just found it fascinating because the way our author was able to throw us in, like someone who's already had such a full life already, and you already feel like you know her, that to me takes talent. I don't know how our author was able to do that and to tell such a full story just through letters. And the narrator for Sybil, if you've ever pictured a Sybil in your brain, this narrator had the perfect tone and voice for our main character, and I fell in love with her. I really enjoyed her story. I thought it was fascinating and very different than what I'm used to reading. The next book that I read in that same reading vlog is Pictures of You by Emma Gray. I've been putting this off for so long, and I'm so mad that I did. This story is following our main character who wakes up from a coma. She was in a car accident with her husband. Her husband passed, and she now has no memory from after she like graduated high school on. So she doesn't even remember her husband. She doesn't know him. She gets thrown into this life where she no longer is talking to her parents. She no longer has the same friends that she had, and her life just looks completely different than it did when she was in high school. She has lots and lots of questions of how she got to this point. Then one of her best friends from high school shows up, and he tries to help her gain her memories back and tries to help her piece together her life. The pacing of the book was done really well because you go from like the then and now, and you're slowly getting all her years back. And one of my biggest critiques on this book was I felt like the ending was very rushed. Like there was stuff that happened and then we didn't like figure that out. Like we just like left it there on almost like a ... This one I felt like had a lot of loose ends at the end. Although I did enjoy the story. I did like the pacing and the way the story was told. And the last book that I read in that reading vlog is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm so glad I finally got to this one. It was so intimidating to me for so long because so many people were rating it 5 stars, and I was afraid I wasn't going to be a part of that group. I was afraid it was going to be overhyped and then I was going to be underwhelmed. But I can happily say that that was not the case for me. I did in fact give this book 5 stars. I went in kind of blind. All I knew about it was following an astronaut and it was a love story. It is set, I want to say, in the 1980s. Our main character, Joan, she is an astronaut, and it starts off and she is one of the people at the control center, and she's talking to the astronauts in space that are currently on their mission. You get her perspective, and then you flash and you get another astronaut's perspective who's in space right now named Vanessa. Like literally first chapter, something goes wrong. Something very high risk happens, and then you flash back into the past to when Joan first came to NASA and joined the team and started training, just like constantly trying to get back to the present timeline because you want to know what happened. I really loved that about this book because it kept me on the edge of my seat. I loved seeing Joan's relationships with people throughout this book. I thought she was just the perfect main character. She's so kind, so intelligent, so loyal, and just an all-around good, kind-hearted person. And I loved following in her footsteps, like following her story. You get to see like her friendships that she makes with the other astronauts. You get to see her relationship with her sister, which was very complex and very interesting. You got to see her relationship with her parents and her relationship with her niece, which her relationship with her niece was my favorite thing to read about in this book. It was so good. I highly recommend it. If you've read anything else by Taylor Jenkins Reid, you definitely need to read this one. I think it might be her best one yet. So those were the only books that I read in that reading vlog. And then I went on a work trip this past week. week and I listened to 2 different audiobooks. The first one I listened to was And the Trees Stare Back, which is like a folk horror. You're following our main character who lives in this small town that is right on the edge of a bog. And this town, there's a lot of stories that people have told about this bog and about how children go missing in this bog. So there's kind of like this magical element a little bit. It feels very eerie and like this bog is alive in a way. Our story starts off with our main character who is 11 years old. She goes exploring in the bog with her 5-year-old sister and her sister gets lost. Then she just kind of has to deal with this guilt that she has for bringing her into the bog. And it flashes forward 5 years in the future. So she's now 16 and all of a sudden her sister comes out of the bog. She finds her sister and she's still 5 years old. It was very interesting and just weird at the same time. It didn't necessarily feel like a horror book, like a typical horror. It was not gruesome in any way. It was definitely more just like the thought of like if there's like a bog creature or folk tales that were being told about this community. That's I think what made it more horror, like leaning in that genre, even though I wouldn't say it's like your typical horror book. It also had a lot of like historical elements thrown in as well. I listened to the author's note at the end and it taught me so much about this community that it's centered around and this time and like what was kind of going on with like the government and things like that. If you are a fan of like grim fairy tales, then I think this would be a great book for you. And then the next audiobook that I also listened to this past week was Operation Bounce House by Matt Dinniman. This is his new standalone sci-fi book that just came out. I definitely recommend the audio. There was like all the different voices for the different characters. It was so immersive. Our story is following our main character who is living on this new planet. He's no longer on Earth. He's living on a new planet. He's living there with a bunch of other colonists and they're trying to slowly bring more people from Earth to this planet. And he lives on his family farm and he's helping raise these honeybees and he has very small aspirations for his life. All he wants to do is just take over his family farm and just live a very quiet and simple life. And one day this machine arrives and it is a boy from Earth is like controlling this machine and he's just going around destroying things. And he finds out that the government on Earth is wanting to just take over this planet and they are just sending bored people from Earth to this planet to help evict all the people who are currently living there so that way they can then take over. He has to band together with the other people in his community and try to protect their planet. If you've read Ready Player One or if you love sci-fi and like video games, this would be a great book for you. I was a little indifferent in some areas. I'm not gonna lie. There were a few areas that I kind of zoned out a little bit while I was listening, but it was still very immersive when I was like locked in. I thought the ending was very funny. I don't know. I was laughing a lot when I was listening to this. And the final book that I read this month, I actually just received, I believe this was already out in print, but it's just now getting republished. I think this upcoming April. And that is Diver's Heart by K.A. Knight. This is the author of Den of Vipers, which I've not read that book, but I recognize that title. So I wanted to read one of this author's books. I have many mixed thoughts and feelings on this book. I don't really know what I was expecting. It is a Why Choose Dark Romance, which I have not read a dark romance in quite a while. So it was definitely interesting getting back into that kind of writing. Also, I've never read a Why Choose Romance before. So that was different for me. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I don't love love triangles. I like it when it's just 2 partners and this one had 5. So definitely not what I expected when I picked it up. However, I did like the actual like story that was being told besides the romance. So that's the reason why I stuck this book out. You're following our main character who is like a world famous diver. She gets invited to go on this brand new excavation in these caves. When she arrives, the team that is there that she is supposed to help with, they are 4 of the guys who she used to be best friends with. Like one of them was her ex-boyfriend and then one is her ex-boyfriend's brother and then their 2 friends. And so there's 4 guys. They all kind of hate her at the beginning because in the past, it was like years ago, she ended up leaving them and now she's back. And so they end up going down in these caves and they're exploring and mapping it out. And while they're down there, things quickly take a turn. They're put in these very dangerous situations and there may or may not be some things down in these caves with them. And so it added this extra layer of danger. It was very fast paced and very adrenaline pumping. I did enjoy the story for that part of it. Did not love the romance. It was also extremely spicy. So if you like spice, you would probably enjoy this story. For someone who doesn't like that much spice, it was pushing it. Not gonna lie, it was pushing me outside my comfort zone in many different areas. I'm sure you guys can tell I'm uncomfortable talking about this, but here we are. My throat hurts from talking. Dun, 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 dun. Ba, 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 ba. And that is going to be it for my February wrap up. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. A lot of them were in reading vlogs, like I said, so definitely go check those out if you are interested in some more in-depth thoughts and feelings on some of these titles. I had a lot of fun this month. I thought it was really great. Leading up to Valentine's Day, I always feel like I am so inspired to read romance, which I used to love romance, but now I'm trying to like branch out into other things. Please comment down below what your favorite book was of February. If you read a romance, what was your favorite romance book that you read most recently? I would love to hear your thoughts. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Happy reading. Bye.